Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. We do have one board member that will be running a little bit late, so we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is January 13th, 6 p.m. And with that said, Ms. Clinton, would you be willing to read the mission statement for us?
The mission of Monument Academy is to provide a challenging, content-rich academic program offered within an engaging, caring, and positive learning environment. Established on a solid foundation of knowledge, Monument Academy emphasizes academic excellence, respect, responsibility, character, and exemplary citizenship.
Thank you, Mrs. Clinton. Would everybody please rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm impressed, Jackie. Saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, we'll move into roll call. Mr. Buczkowski?
Present.
Mrs. Clinton?
Present.
Mr. Dole is absent right now, but we will add him to the record once he arrives. Mrs. McEwen?
Present.
Mrs. St. Alvin?
Present.
And for the record, Ryder Graham is present. We do have a quorum. We will move forward with our agenda. Moving on to letter B, are there any additions or corrections that need to be made to the agenda tonight?
Yes, Ryan. We need to add an item under G, so letter I after H, to discuss increasing the budget for the HR subcommittee.
So moved with that. Is there any discussion on that motion?
No.
All right. Mr. Buczkowski, have your vote, sir?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mrs. McEwen?
Aye.
Mrs. St. Alvin?
Aye.
And Ryder Graham for the record votes aye. And that was for letter I, under items requiring board discussion action.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other additions or corrections to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. All right, Ms. McEwen, you are up with our school spotlight tonight.
All right, thank you. Tonight, we're going to do this just a tad different because we have three wonderful people that we get to honor. Normally we have one, maybe two, but tonight we have three, which is awesome. And I'm very excited to get to do this. So I'm going to ask you if you will allow me to share on each of these three folks and save our applause to the end, where we all honor them together, just for the sake of time. And for Jackie for the photo op at the end.
Thank you.
So good evening. Thank you for joining us here tonight. At the beginning of each of our monthly meetings, we as a board like to honor our staff through our school spotlight. This is a time for us to honor members from our school community who have gone above and beyond in their duties and responsibilities for our school. This nominee can be a teacher, staff, or parent, and tonight, like I said, we have three wonderful folks that we get to recognize and honor this evening. I would like to begin by spotlighting Mrs. Kathy Edwards. Really, I could say a lot about each one of these people, but again, for the sake of time, I will try to be brief. Mrs. Edwards is from Colorado and has her major in education and has taught for over 25 years. She has joined the Monument Academy team in 2019, teaching 6th grade science. Over the years, she has taught anywhere from preschool, kindergarten, through the 12th grade in a variety of subjects. It is clear, and I can vouch personally for this because I have two children who have had Mrs. Edwards and one who currently has Mrs. Edwards. But it is clear that your teaching and your caring for your students is your passion. It is genuine and authentic. When you hear from your own children that a teacher is a favorite, then you know that that teacher is a good one. Middle school students are not easy to please. They are challenging. And I can say that because I have them. So I think that you need to know that, Mrs. Edwards. Here is a direct quote from one of your colleagues. Mrs. Edwards is consistently positive. She is welcoming and contributes to a positive culture. We appreciate all the extra time that she spends participating on the SAC committee and the professionalism she exhibits each day, not to mention that she is a rock star teacher. So we're going to hold our applause, but we are applauding in our hearts for you right now. Next, we would like to spotlight Mrs. Sandy Woods and Mrs. Kim Kavanaugh. We're honoring them together because they were both nominated together. You guys are a powerhouse team, apparently, is what I am told. Mrs. Woods joined the Monument Academy team in 2012 and is currently an RTL reading specialist. In addition to teaching, Mrs. Woods has also worked for nonprofit organizations assisting children and their families and has her master's in education. Mrs. Kavanaugh has joined the MA team in 2017 and is also an RTL and reading specialist. Mrs. Kavanaugh has over 20 years in teaching and education and has her master's in curriculum and instructional reading. Here is a direct quote for both of them by the one who nominated them. I want to nominate Sandy Wood and Kim Kavanaugh for their above and beyond work as reading interventionalists. They not only do a great job teaching our readers, but they help teachers immensely in a variety of ways with guidance and support as we implement the DIBELS and DIBELS deep tests and work with our students. We love them, with several exclamation points. So we want to give you guys, you ladies, a huge thank you for being such a wonderful part of our children's life formation, all three of you. You are a huge blessing to our school, and tonight, please join me as we honor these three wonderful women. Thank you. We get to be in the paper. Okay, so Mrs. Edwards.
Oh, you have to stand together. You're the team.
We're a team.
Yes. Thank you, ladies, for being here. Thanks.
Lindsay.
Oh, we're looking here.
Oh, sorry.
You can look at both places, but at least once over here. Thanks. Thank you.
Did you get yours?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
That was-
well, Sandra, come back. Teachers understand this.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you, ladies, and thank you, Mrs. McKeon. For the record, can we add Chris Stoll to the meeting tonight at 6:05? Mrs. Clem, do we have any citizen comments pertaining to agenda items?
We do not.
I could speak. I didn't sign up, I forgot. I didn't see. But can we speak? Yeah.
Absolutely. Is it, you know if it's an agenda-related item?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
Okay, absolutely. Do you mind giving me your name?
Michael O'Hare. And Sasha is in 10th grade and Ewan is in 7th grade. They grow up so fast, don't they?
All right, Mr. O'Hare.
Thank you.
There's a microphone over here. We just ask that you limit it to 3 minutes.
All right, well, thank you for letting me speak, and Happy New Year, and I really do appreciate the great job Monument Academy has been doing. Yes, you do? So what I wanted to address, I got an email today from Monument Academy addressing, I guess, the state mandate to include changes to the social study program. Personally, I don't have a big issue with it, because I believe that all knowledge, if we teach it properly, we should be able to teach that to our children to a certain extent. However, I grew up in a generation when there was the big debate between separation of church and state. I think, and what I've seen over the last 30 years or so, just through being in academia and watching my children and participating myself. I graduated MBA from Pepperdine, which is a fairly religious school, is that, and I brought this back here today, I would like to see, if we're going to include those things, and especially since you're a charter school, I would like to see that we do bring back the teaching of religion. Not the preaching of religion, there's a difference, but the teaching. I happen to be a Christian, and during the pandemic, actually now I've gotten reacquainted with the Bible. Probably I should have done a better job with that, but I think a lot of us have. And it really teaches us a message of hope, of tolerance, of loving our neighbors, and of turning the other cheek. And I think we've lost this message in our schools today and in our culture. When I turn on the TV, it's just fear and hysteria. And I really feel sorry for the children. I really want to give the children hope out there in this world. And I think the schools can be a great place. I'm not saying that we have to go in and become a religious school. But the fact is, we can't ban this book. If we're going to treat transgenderism and LGBTQ and more respect for minorities, then why can't we teach this? Because all that's in here, well, not transgenderism part, but the part about loving each person and each individual and having respect for each individual person. That's what's in this book here. And I'm hoping that we can bring back religion to our schools in a way where we're not, again, preaching it, but teaching it. And the kids can learn about religion, and then they can do what they will when they're 18 years old or they're on their own. And that's what I'd like to see, and I want to talk about that today because I know a lot of changes will be happening with our curriculum, and there's going to be a lot of contention of what we should teach and what's age appropriate, everything. And at least I know the Holy Bible has always been age appropriate from kindergarten on up. So that's what I wanted to say, and hopefully we can have further discussions about that. Thank you for your time.
Mr. O'Hare, thank you for your comments, sir. All right, moving on to consent agenda. The minutes from December 9th have been distributed to each of you electronically. Do we have right now any corrections or requests for the minutes to be read aloud? Okay, seeing no corrections. The minutes are approved as distributed. Next item on the consent agenda is the approval of the February 10th meeting date. Let's go ahead and approve time and location as well. So I will present February 10th, 6 p.m. here at the East Campus, this room 1004. Any objections to that? Seeing none, meeting date, time, and location is set by unanimous consent. Moving on to reports of administrations and committees. Mr. Holmes, you are up with your COO report, sir.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me okay? One of the first things I'd like to do is announce the hiring of Assistant Principal Mrs. Angela Duca. If you would stand, please. She's already injected her enthusiasm and energy into this campus and getting up to speed, so we really appreciate her. Thank you. We are continuing to move forward with our Phase 2 expansion plans for East Campus. In addition, we have posted the principal position for the West Campus, and that posting has a closing date of January 25th, and then we'll begin interviews shortly after that. I also met with another potential candidate for the open assistant principal position on this campus this week, and we have an interview scheduled with him for next week. The holiday concerts for elementary and secondary for choir, band, and orchestra were all fantastic and well attended. We just have amazing programs with amazing faculty leading those programs, and we really appreciate them very much. School tours, we're now in the open enrollment window for District 38, and school tours are being planned for January and February. They're scheduled at the West Elementary Campus for Tuesdays at 10 o'clock, and on this campus for Wednesdays at 10 o'clock. And we have a number of assistant principals, myself, and Mrs. Amy Torrance are going to be participating in those tours to make sure that we communicate our school and give tours and let them look at facilities, talk about our faculty, curriculum, all those things. Some highlights from East Campus. We did hold the Capturing Kids' Hearts training here, January 4th and 5th. For those of you that are parents, we appreciate you letting us inconvenience you for one more day and letting our staff have that training. It was a good training. Felt like the faculty really got a lot of good ideas out of that training. Cried together, laughed together. And a few of our faculty from the West Campus that weren't able to participate in the training in August also joined us, Mr. Walker and a few other staff. Both of those days, lunch was provided, and PTO, we want to thank PTO for the chili feast on Wednesday, January 5th. That was awesome. Our girls basketball teams on this campus are off to a great start. I think they're all still undefeated, right? And so they won by some pretty big margins. So we'll find some tougher competition as we go through the season, but they're off to a great start, both from numbers of participation and from their competitive play. Student Council also did some volunteer work at Ronald McDonald House over the vacation. West Campus highlights, grades 4th and 5th joined the 6th through 10th Winter Strings concert at Palmer Ridge High School. Again, Mrs. Patterson and her students did a fantastic job. And I see she walked in, so good job. PTO gave the teachers and staff an appreciation luncheon along with some gifts on the 10th of December. And the staff greatly appreciates the work our PTO does. Mr. Walker, as I stated earlier, he did join our Capturing Kids' Hearts training, and they really did have a great time together, just talking through heart issues and how to connect with students in a way that's professional and honorable, but also helps them do a great job in classroom management. And then they've also started their staff spotlight again and started this week recognizing a couple members, and they'll get special parking spots over there, which, as you know from parking and traffic over there, a special parking spot will worth a lot. And I also wanted to just make a recommendation based on an agenda item that comes up later in the agenda. I know one of the things that we've talked about at several board meetings is where will 6th graders be for next year? And that was based off the fact that we are running out of space on this campus. And so there's a variety of factors that we looked at. The first thing we did, as you remember, was we did a survey of our current 5th grade parents. And about half those parents wanted their kids to be here. About a fourth of them were whatever you decide, whatever works best is okay with them. And then we have about a fourth of our parents who wanted their students to stay at the West Campus. So that was one of the things that we looked at. Another factor in the recommendation I'm making tonight is that car line issues at the West Campus are somewhat uncertain, and they continue to be, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about that in the 105 report. But it's uncertain whether some of the changes that the county is planning will be completed by the start of school next year, and that is a factor in this recommendation as well. Some of our bond covenants have also influenced this recommendation, as Mr. Brocklehurst has looked into those, and we've discussed some of those. And then one of the other factors that we have been looking into is would we be able to get portable modular space for this campus at a reasonable price. And just in the last week, I've had a gentleman contact me with a couple of potential possibilities for 4, 6, maybe even 8 classrooms here on this campus for some used modulars, and he's working on getting me a firm price, but we think that those modulars might come at a reasonable rate. And so due to all those factors, parent wishes, car line issues, and all those, I am recommending that all 6th graders be at this campus for next year. Questions, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I will have further questions on that, but I figure I'll wait till we get to board discussion action regarding the modulars. Board, do you have any further questions for Mr. Holmes based on his?
Actually, I do. This week we had to make the decision to close the East Campus for a couple of days. And one of the issues, of course, well, the main issue was, of course, with staff out and needing subs. And there has been some talk amongst parent community about how to become a sub, if there's training for those kinds of things, and that is what I gather, some of the reasons why parents aren't jumping on it is they're a little bit intimidated by coming in as a sub and not really knowing what they're doing. So with that, I wanted to suggest or get your thoughts on how we could have a training or something along those lines that would further engage our parent community to be willing to come in, help staff the school as subs, but give them an opportunity to learn a little bit more about, a lot of parents are very educated, but they don't have a classroom management background. They don't have a background on classical curriculum. If there is even a way to give just a brief training to help kind of subs come in, I think that would really engage our parents to be willing to do that, to keep the kids in school knowing that's the best place for them. So I guess I'm just kind of throwing that out there, but I'm also curious about your thoughts on ways we can get more subs in, as well knowing that we should also just keep looking at our substitute pay and how competitive we are with the district around us.
Yeah, the substitute issue, we've discussed it actually at our finance committee meeting this week. That was an area of discussion that we're looking into to make sure that our pay is competitive. We also discussed it today at our administration meeting on how we can boost our substitute numbers. And I think the idea of making sure that some of our parents understood that they would get training along with that and they wouldn't just be thrown into a classroom without that, I think is a good idea as well. So there's a number of things I think we need to do to try to increase our substitute numbers. We're not alone in having those issues, but I think there's some things that we can do from a pay standpoint and from a training and communication standpoint to increase those numbers. So, thank you.
How quickly could we do that?
I would think we could have an announcement put together by early next week. And then if we can get a group that would respond and want to do that and be trained, probably by the end of this month we could have that training in place. I'm looking for my experts here for nods, but I would think in the next couple of weeks we can move that forward substantially.
How long would that training be for the parents that wanted to be a part of that?
Well, I'm not sure how many hours that would be. I guess that's part of, Friday afternoons, kids aren't in school, so that maybe a 2 or 3 hour training in Friday afternoon is my original thought, but part of that we kind of need to figure out what the needs are and how much training. Some might need more than others. Some might take the basic classes, and others might feel like they need a little bit more beyond that.
One, with all of this, it makes me just think this would need to be something that's ongoing and continual throughout the year as we are having new subs come in. So maybe at this time, if you're not already doing this, which I'm sure you are, just taking a look at our sub protocol procedures and including this in that. And so as new people come in, this is obviously an unprecedented issue. So anyway, that would just be my thought.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Any further questions? Thank you, sir. Mr. Brocklehurst.
We are halfway through the fiscal year. Let's see, December. Revenue in December, we had $837,000. To date, we're at about $5.3 million, or 47% of the annual budgeted revenue. Variance continues to be the same thing. As grant dollars come in over the year, that's going to fluctuate. Expenses for the month of December were $924,000. To date, we've spent $4.5 million, which is 40% of the annual budgeted expense. Variance there due to purchase services, repairs and maintenance, equipment purchases being lower than monthly budget. For the month of December, we had a net loss of $87,000, and to date, we're at a net income of $847,000. Last year at this time, our net income was $590,000. Later on tonight, we'll get the audit update, so I'll let, he's coming a little later, but I'll let him, Dylan Garrison, explain the audit there. There were some other highlights that I made in the report with the audit, run some metrics that we do throughout the year. Cash on hand looks good. We're in compliance with all our bond requirements, so that's always a good thing. Aside from that, any questions you have? I'll keep it short today because a lot of exciting stuff.
I was going to say thank you for the metrics. It's easier for me to understand, so I appreciate that.
Is there anything I can answer on those?
No, I appreciate that you showed the correlation going all the way back to fiscal year 13-14. So, actually very helpful to see just how much tracked in relation to previous fiscal years. Is this typically something you would do towards the end of the calendar year?
After the audits are received, because I use the numbers from the audit, so that you have audited information that applies to this. And this is what we use for the bond compliance documents that we file as well.
Perfect. Board, any further questions? Mr. Roberts? All right, thank you, sir.
No, thank you.
All right, we will move into our committee reports. Mr. Holmes, I'm going to put you on the spot because both Mrs. St. Aubin and I were obviously absent from the 105 meeting this week, and are you able to speak on that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This week, several of us met with El Paso County. Mr. Walker and Ms. Barrett joined me at that meeting. We discussed in the meeting some of the plans and that they're working on for the recirculation plan. And then we went out and walked some of the area to take a look at what some of the things that they're proposing. I think most of that went very well. As we've experienced before, they're very they're very committed to getting started, but the finish line is not as adamant as maybe what we would like. I think they're very hopeful that it'll all be finished before August, but I think on our team there's some doubt about that. Vinny also joined us in that meeting, and I think he's his concerns are even higher than mine on their ability to do that. A couple of things that did come up in the meeting that we asked them to review and go back and take another look at. One of the things that they proposed, I think about a month ago, and was not in the original plans, was that they want to move part of the turf field, about 25 feet of the turf that's on the north side of that field, and put it on the south side. And when we walked that, it presented a number of challenges. The biggest one being that if you the 25 feet from the south end of the field is a drainage ditch, which is going to be significant cost and seems it's going to disrupt things quite a bit. There's actually cuts into the slope that is there going up to the playground. So there's a number of challenges with that, and we suggested that they look at just building a little bit more retaining wall on the north east corner of that field and not move that field, because they have to move goalposts, they have to move field, they have to move long jump pit. There's a variety of things that just it feels impractical to do that. And we asked them to look and see if they can move that based on property lines and the mouse mitigation habitat and things like that. So they're going to take a look at that. The other thing that we asked them to re-examine is somehow in the last couple of iterations of the plan, the entry road where it comes off the fire department has a roundabout where fire trucks can turn around. Well, in the beginning stages, the entry to that recirculation plan was more towards the west part of that circle. And now they've moved it over to the east part of the circle where the benches are, and then the road goes right where the kids come from the school out to the playground. And it was kind of interesting because while we were outside, actually was a transition for recess. And so we were standing right there when 100 kids are coming in and coming out. And I think they understood that they really need to look at that because they're putting the road right in the middle of the place where the kids come and go, with just leaving a sidewalk for them to go on, which is going to mean if we do end up with just that sidewalk, it's going to take much longer to get kids in and out of the playground. But like I said, most of the meeting went well. Their plans are moving forward. They are still wanting us to review the plans, and they think they'll have those to us next week for our people to review. But those two changes, we asked them to look at that because it just seems a little bit impractical from a use standpoint.
Thank you for that. Today, so next week, we would have the new set of plans potentially for review.
I believe that's what they said, that we have next week.
Did they talk about a meeting date this time?
There wasn't another meeting date set up. It was give us the plans and then our third-party review. We have a chance to look at them. They're hoping that after that review, then they can be submitted to the state by the end of the month.
And when would we be looking at an MOA or an MOU?
You mean for us to?
Yeah.
I think it would come in the same timeline, but we didn't discuss that piece of it that much. We're mostly looking at the plans.
Thank you for presenting on that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry
You're
for
welcome.
the last minute.
Hey, Brian, quick question. So like the whole approval process, first we have like the county and us will get to a memorandum of understanding. Then what's the approval process with the state and higher education? Or, I'm sorry, Department of Education.
So in the interim, we are looking at bringing in, and I'm looking at Mark here on this, we are looking at bringing in a third-party individual to basically let us know that we're on the right path here. But the county, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the third-party approvals, the El Paso County, they're going to be taking that on at the state level. But we also, as a school, would have to present, it would coincide with the county's approvals to get our approval through the CDE. Is that correct? Or the way you understand it?
That's correct.
Okay.
And they're saying that right now, those applications, when they're submitted, sit in a pile somewhere for 10 weeks. So it's a slow process.
We have to get approvals through, and the county, from what I understand, is going to help through this, the Division of Fish and Game for the Preble Field Mouse, and how that's going to all play out, that will be handled by the county. And there was one other approval that we would have to have through, I believe it was Whitmore Water, if I'm not mistaken, regarding that easement issue.
Yeah, there's a couple easements. So I think the electric easement is the one that they're most concerned about, if they can move some electric lines. It's the 10 weeks is really what's causing the concern of not getting it started in time.
So a lot of moving parts to it right now. Yeah. But we as a school are going to have to agree to the project that they're presenting, and so that's where we're at right now. And then all the third-party approvals will be starting from there. So hopefully we can come to some type of agreement in the next week or two.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dan.
I actually have just a discussion item to just ask for, because we have so far not been able to get a third-party review of the plans. I know we had talked about that this would be something we want to do before we sign an MOU, Can we just have some discussion around that? Is it more important to move the plans forward so that we can get the plan built, or get a review? If, if we have to choose, what do you guys think?
What are the downsides if we don't do the review?
We're not experts.
So that affects money and budget and,
Well, not really money and budget, because that, the county is, providing the funding, or the state, but,
I guess what are the
More-
downsides?
more, the downsides would be,
Well, we talked about it at one point. We either get this correct or it's like
right,
forever wrong.
right.
So,
So it kind of seems like we definitely should get the review.
I'm of the mindset that, yes, we need to do our due diligence right here, right now.
Yes.
Make sure we're not putting our names on something that's going to come back and hurt us in the long run.
I agree.
Yeah. So, just so we all are clear that that could possibly delay this a little bit.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that, St. Alvin. Mrs. Clinton, you are up with curriculum.
I have no report for curriculum at this time.
All right, Ms. St. Alvin, back to you with SAC West.
Okay. So the SAC committee actually met Tuesday. I was not able to attend that meeting either. But the parent survey at the SAC West, first the West campus, had a 39% participation, so a little bit under our goal. There's a lot of positives. The three main takeaways, and this is notes I'm reading from Jamie Harding, who is the chair of this committee. And this is from the meeting that was held Tuesday that I wasn't at. The three main takeaways that they would like to focus on at West for the SAC committee are character. She said administration is looking into the 8 Keys of Excellence character program, and looking at other curriculum to supplement what the school already does. So providing handouts for parents, and just there's some confusion about, it's not clear, parents aren't sure what the curriculum in character is being taught. And then in Carline, when the survey was done, we were only 2 weeks into the new Carline, but overall felt like the results from the survey were actually pretty positive. They'd like to have us reassess the Carline procedures for next year. And if a bus is decided, if we want to look into a bus, the SAC committee is advising the board to poll parents to find out what the participation would be. And then just there was a lot of positive that many different clubs were beginning at the West Campus. So overall, pretty great, pretty positive results. So.
Thank you, Mrs. St. Alvin. Any questions? Mrs. McEwen, you are up with SAC East, please.
Okay, so for the SAC East, our survey went a week longer than the West Campus. It went right up into school getting out for break. And so we did not get our information back until school resumed. And we had our first meeting of the year yesterday. And so we are in the beginning process of reviewing it. And again, we met yesterday, we had a great meeting. We had a really good meeting, and we attend the DAC committee meeting as well. And yesterday, was it yesterday or Tuesday? Tuesday, it was our school's turn to give a secondary school update. And so we had great representation. Mrs. Edwards, Mrs. Davis, I believe, Timiko, were you there as well? Mrs. Duco is there. And so they did a great job, I was told, of representing our school. They brought the board showing visually where we are in the process of phase 2. And so I heard that went really well, and I'm grateful that we had such good representation there. Thank you. So we got an update at our meeting yesterday about that. And again, like I said, we began the review process of our mid-year survey, which we had a really good turnout. We had, I believe, 75% parent participation, which is phenomenal. I know that. Good job to all of you parents. That's amazing. And so obviously the kids all won their prize days and everything, and they're excited about that. Let's see here. I will have the East SAT Committee letter of recommendations to the board at our February meeting. And something that came out of our time yesterday that we're going to do a little bit differently. Typically in the past, the SAT Committee has presented a letter of recommendations based on the survey to the board. We will continue to do that, but we're also going to present a letter of recommendations to the admin team for those items that are more pertinent to them than to us. We will still get that as well, but we felt like that would be a better use of that information if the board, or excuse me, the admin had that as tools. That made the most sense. So there will be 2 letters of recommendation for review, one to the board and one to the admin, so they could see and make those proper adjustments and growth points. Let's see here. Oh, and another thing that is new out of the meeting yesterday was the SAT Committee is requesting that the board and admin provide a written response of actions that are going to be taken or have been taken based on these recommendations. So that point of accountability, as well as just the desire to continue growing, we would like to have that as well, that response of these are the things that we're doing based on your recommendations. Obviously that'll probably be sometime down the road. That takes some time to implement those things, but we felt like that was a good forward course of action for those recommendations. And just some initial key takeaways in the beginnings of our reviewing the information. In general, again, we had a very high participation. There's a lot of improvement going on in the midst of some very challenging growing points that we're going through, but there's also some key points of growth that are clear that I don't think were surprising to any of us. Things we've been talking about, things with better communication, discipline, which we're working on and the admin is already implementing. There's a desire from the community to meet the new assistant principals, and so I thought I'd pass that along here. I don't know if we could do maybe a meet and greet of the new assistant principals that we brought on, but that was also a strong consensus in the comments from parents. And then lastly here, with all of the recent change, there was also a strong consensus in the survey comments from parents on the need to clarify the role of the board and the role of the admin, and that it could be good to communicate and reaffirm the chain of command as it is laid out in the MA handbook, so that parents know who to reach out to when they have a concern or a compliment, if that makes sense. So those are just some key takeaways. I don't know if you want to add anything, either of you, to that. Feel free, or Mrs. Edwards, but those were the key points that I came away with from the meeting. Okay, any questions?
Thank you, Mrs. McEwen. Move on to governance. As you'll see on the agenda tonight, we have 7 policies that have gone through governance that will be reviewed tonight. Some of them are just reviewed, some are redlined. I'd like to thank Mr. Buczkowski for all his work on this. He's been very instrumental in getting all this put together. On January 25th, we'll have a few more policies that we'll be reviewing: 1522, 1525, 1526, 1527, and then we're going to go back to 1518A, B, and 1519. So at our February board meeting, we'll have another roughly 7 policies to bring back. So that's my report for governance. Mr. Dole, you are open finance, sir.
Good evening, everybody, and my apologies for being a few minutes late. I was late getting my daughter from the West Campus for basketball practice to home, and then there happened to be a fairly good-sized accident here at the intersection, and cars were being diverted. So again, my apologies on that. The Finance Committee did meet this last week. What I'm saying is going to be a little repetitive, as Mr. Holmes and Mr. Brabahurst touched on several points that took place during that meeting. Shortly, you'll be hearing about the audit, the completion of the results there. From a board's perspective, board members there there's two takeaways or two things that I focused on. The first one is we're going to learn a little bit tonight in terms of these audits, how pensions are held on the books, I believe, and how that can skew the numbers, and just take some time to understand how pensions are held on our financials and what it really means, because it's not a liability technically of the school, but it is held on these financials, and therefore it looks like a very large liability. Secondly, the audit will confirm the financial results, the loss that was actually incurred for the last fiscal year, and we know what that number is. It'll be confirmed. Unfortunately, it's a lot better than where we originally started the last fiscal school year. Mark spoke to some of the review that was done in terms of the cash on hand. I just wanted to quantify that a little bit from a build process as we get ready for RFP or RFQ, whichever term you want to use there. One of the key markers is how much cash we have on hand from a bond perspective. And the number that our bond holder prospects are going to like to see is north of 80 days cash on hand. Currently, we're sitting at about, overall collective between the two campuses, we're sitting at about 141 cash days on hand. The audit has been done for the West Campus. We can break it down further. The West Campus has 136 days of cash on hand, and Mark is in the process and should have this in the next couple of weeks for the East Campus, but it is a little cumbersome breaking out the books and the numbers for both campuses. But we're in a really good financial position. Substitute teacher pay, just a little education for those in the room that may not know about it. It was a learning process for me. There's different tiers based on how long they're serving as a substitute teacher, and I was pleased to learn that looking at some different spectrums, how we compete amongst charter schools, how we compete within our own district, how we compete cross-district. Although we'd like to get pay up, and it looks like we're going to be able to announce maybe some new pay structure here shortly. We're not that far off when we look specifically within D38. We did toss around some ideas as to how we could restructure some pay in different tiers based on the number of days served as a substitute teacher, maybe encouraging substitute teachers to be repetitive at MA and get them into that higher tier maybe a little bit quicker. That's one of the things that I suggested, and Mark will be looking at that. And then with respects to 6th grade, Mr. Holmes already reported that we're waiting on the financial cost back from at least one provider that we just got wind of, and he had hoped, I should say, Mr. Holmes had hoped that we would have that cost for you today, but inevitably it's taken a little bit longer. And just to echo or repeat that Mr. Holmes did state that his suggestion is to move 6th grade, or keep 6th grade, excuse me, at the East Campus. And from the Finance Committee, barring any unforeseen obscene number on these portables, we agree with that as well. And then lastly, the status of RFP, RFQ for the second phase build out. We believe that we will be in a position here by the end of the month that will allow us to be ready sometime in February to put out a request for proposal or request for quote, if that's correct. And we are still on track and still hopeful that we will be able to break ground late spring. And we are still on track with the primary objectives being the build out of the second wing, the full-size gymnasium, and the track. We continue to work on the projects and partnerships for the swim facility. And although there was not any talk of it, it's not, I just want to acknowledge it's not off our list, but also the Performing Arts Center. But that's the order in which we're approaching this, and we hope to be able to announce that the first three pieces will be underway here late spring.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Whittle. Board, any questions? Mr. Whittle?
Were you looking into a partnership for the performing arts? Or is that just part of the potential plan?
At this point, we haven't discussed partnership with the performing arts. I'm sure that will be part of the discussion. Partnership right now is focused on the opportunity for the swim center or aquatic center.
So will you be looking for partnerships when you're going into the process of phase 2? Are you going to be looking for partnerships? Is that part of the process, or is it more just getting bonds?
ideally, there would be cost savings if we could proceed with the aquatic center in conjunction with phase 2. Just due to the fact that equipment's here, utilities are being moved, et cetera. But we're not at a point where we can say that the aquatic center could break ground in conjunction with the start date of phase 2. That's something that we're still exploring.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gold. Mr. Buchkowski, you're up with Buildings and Facilities.
No update, Ryan.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Clinton, Volunteer Committee.
I don't have anything specific to report right now, except that we will be meeting on January 24th, and hopefully I'll have a lot more to report in February.
Thank you. Mrs. St. Aubin, Resource Development Committee.
I do have an update for that. So the event committee is being chaired by Wendy Breathauer, and she's doing a fantastic job with very little time to pull an event together. She does have 20 people who have volunteered to help, which is phenomenal. The theme of the night will be Invest in Tomorrow, and the event will be held on Thursday, April 7th at the Boot Barn. And what they are doing is a parents' night out, so adults only. They're going to have a comedian and a live auction. So what she needs at this point is if you have any connections or a business that you can offer live or silent auction items, she is looking for those, and pulling a auction together this quickly is difficult, so please help. And finally, the goal will be $100,000, and that will be split between, maybe not split, it'll go toward, I should say, safety, school safety, as well as teacher bonuses. So that is what's going on for research development.
Thank you. That was April 7th.
April 7th, Thursday.
All right, thank you, Mrs. St. Aubin. Mr. Buchkowski or Mrs. McEwen, an update on the HR subcommittee.
I think Joe's gonna.
Yep, thank you. And yes, we've actually made some really solid progress in the last month. So Misty and I interviewed multiple HR consultants to do the assessment, look at the grievance policy and so forth. And some of them were really not the right fit for MA. We did end up receiving formal proposals from 2 companies, and out of those 2, we chose Employers Council to perform the assessment. So who is Employers Council? So it's an 80-year-old company. They have about 200 employees and clients throughout the U.S. They're based here in Colorado, and they do a wide variety of HR consulting. They also have a wide variety of corporate clients, including schools. MA used to be a member of Employers Council in the past, interestingly, and our survey contact was actually a board member of Peak to Peak Charter School, and her kids go there. And some of the other people that we're working with also are involved in education. So it's a pretty good fit right there. So what was their proposal? Well, really, they would have sort of 2 phases. The first phase, which Misty and I already committed to in contract. First of all, we joined their annual membership for $1,500 per year. And so we only have a 1-year commitment, but of the $10,000 that we were allocated, $1,500 is to be used for the membership in the organization. Then they're going to help us perform the survey assessment for $2,400, and they're reviewing the grievance policy for $320. So we've committed to $4,220 of the $10,000 that we were allocated. They also recommend sort of a phase 2 of the assessment. So using the survey results that would come in, they would do what they call a 360-degree COO survey for $400, a COO coaching package for $7,500, some team building for faculty and staff for up to $2,250, and they also recommend establishing an ethics hotline for $50 per month. So those numbers add up to an additional 10,150. Certainly, this company was substantially cheaper than one of the other companies that we had received a proposal from. And this company also has excellent reputation, but that initial 10,000 that we discussed a month ago without knowing exactly what we want to do is like insufficient if we really value carrying forward action after the survey assessment. So let me give you a little bit of details about the survey. So we'll be able to survey both campuses, so east and west, all employees, so faculty and staff. They'll receive an email link to an online questionnaire, and we've recruited Tamiko, Sherry, Kurt, and Laura to help us choose the survey questions. Using a set of dozens of questions that Employers Council provided to choose from, or to at least sort of get our creative juices going, we're allowed to submit any questions we want. But they have a lot of survey best practices and a lot of kind of canned questions to choose from, even for something like this, which is sort of assessing, you know, culture of the school and just sort of employee buy-in. So the questions are editable and can be open-ended, and we actually have a meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. to start the process of choosing the questions. We hope to send the survey out by the end of January and have results by the next board meeting. If that turns out to be unfeasible, then we'll have the results by the March board meeting. So that's the survey. Let me talk a little bit about the grievance policy review, which is already done. So they reviewed our employee handbook and the grievance policy for basically grievance or problem-solving issues. And now they're just awaiting any feedback or questions from governance committee after we review their recommendations. And they basically came up with 4 recommendations, and so I'll read those here. They actually want us to consider, so number 1, consider eliminating the grievance policy in favor of a problem-solving policy. And really a grievance policy traditionally is used in more union-like environments, but that does not apply to us. And so they have kind of a form problem-solving policy for us to consider instead. 2, consider implementing a problem-solving policy in addition to the formal grievance policy. 3rd, this one's important just for some legal reasons. We need to delineate harassment and discrimination issues are investigated outside of the grievance and problem-solving arenas altogether. So that's going to require an edit to our employee handbook, right? 4, they also want us to consider utilizing the Employers Council third-party ethics and compliance hotline service for employees to report workplace incidents. How this hotline would work, it's just a toll-free and can be anonymous hotline for any of the employees to call if there is like an ethics violation or some other grievance or issue that they would like to report anonymously. And there certainly something like that would have been of benefit to Miami Academy in the past. What we plan to do is ask in the survey, you know, Misty and I thought about at least maybe 2 questions asked in the survey of employees is, would they like us to sort of change up the grievance policy to more of a problem-solving policy? And would the employees like to have this hotline for $50 a month? So those are 2 things that are going on. Then, so what's next is today to discuss with, as a board here, if we want to approve sort of phase 2 of the cost of their proposal, which is then providing coaching and team building based upon the survey results that are forthcoming. So that's something that we can discuss. And I know, and Misty, I'm going to put you on the spot. They also had some recommendations about kind of our mission statement with faculty. And so Misty, would you like to maybe mention what you thought was important there?
Oh, yeah. I think in this process that we've been in, learning about this resource, learning what our needs are as a school, it's become very clear, I would say to probably all of us, but especially to Joe and I, as we've been searching and getting to know these different third-party entities and just thinking about everything. And something that Employers Council said the other day when we were meeting with them that really stood out to Joe and I believe that's what you're referring to now, is she made a statement that's basically said, what is your mission for your staff? And that really struck me, and Joe and I came away and we're talking about that after our meeting with and the rep was, what is our mission for our staff? You know, I think we've been really good as a school and having a mission as a school, having a mission for students, our curriculum, our education, the way that we want to do all of those things. But something that, you know, we're really seeing is the need to add on, and it makes sense for where we are as an organization, growing and expanding the way that we are, and learning of all these places of growth, that we would need to add on now. Not only do we value our students and our curriculum and education, and it's very clear on our website, all of that information, but we want to make sure that we are adding and growing in how we value our staff, our teachers, and everybody. And we really see this third-party entity as a large part of helping us get on track in that avenue of being a school that is holistic, and that we value our students, we value our staff, we value the education, we value all of the things, that there is not one piece that is weaker than another in our whole system. And so that, you know, speaks to the need of not just a temporary fix. We're not looking for just a temporary fix. I think we all can agree we are looking for a long-term solution, and how we can obviously fix the current issues, but long-term, you know, we're all not gonna be here forever, you know, but how can we set up our organization in such a way that we are continuing to stay true in all of these different avenues. And this, I think Joe and I are really seeing and would like to, you know, say to us, is a primary avenue that would help us to stay true to having that holistic approach of valuing all, the staff, the students, the education that they're receiving here. And I think that goes without question that that's who we are, that's who we want to be. And so we really see this third-party entity, and we would like to see us continue beyond just the now with what we need with the survey and the different things Joe's mentioning, but looking at investing in the team building, the long-term membership to this organization. At least at the moment, it can be another organization down the road, but for now, I think that long-term look and approach is necessary for who we are and where we want to be in 5 years from now. Is that what you were wanting?
Yeah, very good.
Okay.
Strong work to both of you. Thank you very much. It was very informative, and appreciated hearing everything that I did here. If we, you know, actually, I'll wait till we get to discussion and action, and I'll have some further questions on this. So, board, is there anything further on committee reports? Okay, perfect. All right, we'll move on to discussion and action items. The first item under that tonight is the Clifton Larson Allen audit presentation. I'm assuming that's you, sir?
That's me, yeah.
Thank you. What is your name?
Dylan Garrison.
Dylan Garrison. Thank you for being here tonight. There's a microphone over here. Is there anything you need from us right now?
Nope.
Okay.
All right, can everybody hear me okay? I don't know if my voice is probably loud enough anyways. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. One sec. Okay, so my name's Dylan Garrison. I was the manager on the engagement this year at Clifton Larson Allen. So I just wanted to introduce myself, and I want to give a quick shout out to Mark. He's a pleasure to work with, and he does a great job handling the finances of the charter school. And I just want to say thank you because he makes my life extremely easy going through this process on an annual basis. So I know we all have copies of the financial statements, hopefully, whether they're printed out or PDF. So the first thing I wanted to kind of dive right into is going to be the audit opinion. So that's going to be on page 1. So this audit opinion is an unmodified audit opinion, which is essentially the highest level of assurance you can receive when you go through this external audit, which essentially what it means is these financial statements are free from material misstatement. And if you go to the next page on the audit opinion, you'll see we have a emphasis of matters paragraph related to GASB 84 that Mark and I went through, and we implemented that this year, and we had a restatement just related to the change in principle related to the student activity accounts within the charter school. So I just wanted to highlight on the audit opinion, as I think that's something to be proud of, as it's the highest level of assurance you can receive. So now as we jump in, kind of do the fun stuff here. We got a 59-page document. I'm going to kind of highlight on more of the important aspects that I believe are relevant this year for the charter school. And so if you go to page 4, you'll see this starts the management's discussion and analysis. And so we have a 5-page kind of Cliff Notes version of the entire document in terms of high level, different funds, activity that took place, increases, decreases. So this is the section that you'll want to focus on if you haven't had time to kind of review the financial statements and you're trying to get a quick Cliff Notes version of essentially what took place during the fiscal year that went under audit. The management's discussion and analysis would be the place to start. But what I'm going to jump into is going to be the basic statements. And so those are going to start on page 10. And so with those, as Chris was kind of highlighting on earlier, we have a couple different types of statements here. So we have full accrual statements and then we have modified accrual statements. So the first statements you're going to see are going to be the statement of net position and then the statement of activities. So these two statements are going to be the full accrual statements where they're going to include all the long-term liabilities, all the long-term assets. And that's kind of where these numbers get a little bit skewed when you kind of start looking at the full accrual versus what we call modified accrual in the accounting world, or some people refer to as the budgetary basis of accounting, which a lot of school districts, charter schools kind of follow that roadmap, if you would, in terms of just understanding the resources available and kind of the bottom line of essentially the entire year. So when you look at the full accrual statements, you're going to see that we have all of our non-current liabilities, which would be our outstanding bond debt. We're going to have our pension liabilities. We're going to have our OPEB liabilities. We're going to have our related deferred outflows and inflows to the pension and OPEB plans. And then we're also going to have our capital assets on the full accrual statement. So you can kind of see all those there on the statement of net position. And then as you flip to the next page, you'll see the statement of activities. And so on a full accrual basis, the charter essentially gained a change in net position of $1.3 million. But again, I just want to outline that this is not exactly the same type of accounting that I think a lot of school districts and charter schools are familiar with. So that's where I want to jump ahead and go to the balance sheet for governmental funds. So that is on page 12. So on page 12, this is going to have all of the funds of the charter school. And as you can see, the total fund balance is going to be essentially the resources that the charter school has. So we had just over $6.1 million is how we ended 2021 for resources between all of our funds. $2.2 million of that was unassigned, and then the rest of the reserves is essentially either assigned or restricted for certain categories or types of activity to kind of make sure that those resources are essentially assigned to the proper categories. So then if you go to the next page, you're going to see this fund reconciliation here, and this is what makes governmental accounting, I think, so much fun for some and also so painful for others. So you can see that they start with the fund balances for the total governmental funds. So that's going to be your modified accrual basis. So that's going to be the $6.1 million. And then it outlines essentially all the items that are making up the differences between the modified accrual statements and the full accrual statements, which is essentially the last line on there, the net position in governmental activities. So if you go back to that first page we were looking at, you'll see the total net position will match the ending amount on that reconciliation. So this is going to show you essentially what the differences are between modified to full accrual, and you can see why there's such large fluctuations and sways when you're kind of looking at the ending resources. So if we go to page 14, this is going to be the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So for the 2021 fiscal year, we spent down reserves of $5.2 million when you consider all funds of the charter school. You can see the biggest spend down was related to the foundation fund, and you can see a bulk of those expenditures were the capital outlay expenditures to complete this lovely building we're currently sitting in. This was completed during this fiscal year. So then if you go to the next page, same type of reconciliation here between the full accrual statements to the modified accrual statements, where it shows you essentially the change in the spend down of resources of the $5.2 million. It breaks out the full accrual and modified accrual differences to get you to the overall change in your net position for governmental activities of $1.3 million. So those are basically the meat and potatoes. That's all the activity of the charter school, kind of summarized on different types of statements. Some are presented on full accrual, some are presented on modified accrual, but that's going to have all of the activity of the charter. And then what we dive into next is the notes to the financial statements. So these next 30 or so pages are going to be all the detailed information supporting all the numbers in the basic statements. It's going to have kind of the background story as to how the numbers were put together, any assumptions, valuations, anything that would be necessary to the reader to kind of have in front of them. That's what these footnotes are going to explain. And so the two footnotes I do want to highlight on that I think are significant this year is going to be footnote number 3 to start with, and so that's going to be the capital assets. So we can see we had construction in progress. We had a pretty significant balance at the end of last fiscal year, 2020. That was $18.7 million, and then we had kind of the last expenditures related to this building we're in now, and then this building was essentially placed into service, so you can see it's being transferred out of the construction in process, and it's going into the depreciable asset categories as it was placed into service, and it's a beautiful building, I must say. So then the next footnote I want to dive into kind of what Cole outlined earlier, Chris, my apologies, Chris. The defined benefit pension plan. So this is the statewide pension plan for the school division trust fund. So, Monument Academy is one of hundreds of districts or charters, if you want to think of it like that, that contribute into the cost sharing pool of the statewide plan. And so when you really consider how many entities there are that contribute into this plan, those numbers are always changing because those contribution amounts are always changing between all the different entities. So those contribution amounts will determine the proportionate share. So if you really dive into where these numbers are coming from, the statewide pension plan will have a full-blown audit that's done. They report all the ending balances, and then at the end of the day, they come through and they calculate what all the different school districts and charter schools' proportionate share is based on the contributions to the plan. And so based on that proportionate share, if that's how all the activity gets allocated, so as you can kind of maybe picture in your head, that's why there's so many fluctuations, changes between, either new school districts being added to the plan, school districts removed from the plan, contributions increasing or decreasing amongst all the various school districts that the state of Colorado has. So just trying to paint the picture as to all these variable items that come into play, and I think it kind of can misconstrue some of the readers in terms of the actual activity related to the pension information. Hopefully that kind of explains how they get to those amounts. It can be kind of confusing. But I wanted to highlight that on footnote number 7 and footnote number 8. And as you'll see in here, they go into all the details specific on the contributions that are made. So that 19.88% were the required employer contributions to the pension plan. And if you go to page 30, you'll see that proportionate share that I was trying to explain. It talks about the school's proportionate share as 0.07, that goes into this long decimal percentage. So that is essentially all of the activity that's getting allocated to Monument Academy from the cost sharing plan. But that's a very significant number, as that is going to drive all the activity. So then after the footnotes, we have what's called the RSI schedules. So if you go to the RSI schedules, these are going to have kind of more, I think, probably what we're all familiar with here, more the budgetary basis of accounting. And so in the state of Colorado, you have specific budgetary laws and compliance requirements to follow. Meaning, if you look at this schedule here for like the general fund, that you can see the final budgeted amounts for the general fund were 9.7 million. If you look in the actual column, you'll see that the actual expenditures in the general fund were only 9.2 million, meaning that we did not over exceed our final budgeted amount, meaning we're in compliance with Colorado state law. So I just kind of like to highlight on that, because anytime, you know, certain situations happen, especially with the year that we just went through with all the changes, and I'm sure, you know, things, as we all can imagine, with the pandemic changed drastically in terms of just estimates, quotes, and all that type of stuff. So I think it's important to highlight that Monument Academy did not have any budget violations and was in compliance with Colorado state laws. So then at the last kind of RSI schedules are just related to some of the net pension liability and also OPEB liability information. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over. Does anyone have any specific questions or want me to highlight on anything, maybe in more detail in the financial statements specifically, that would be helpful maybe, or maybe elaborate more on, I guess, anything that would be helpful?
Looking at my treasurer right now.
No, let's just be honest, most of this goes over our head, right? We don't understand what these numbers mean. I think at the end of the day, to me, the audit confirms that our CFO is doing his job. We're spending our money wisely. We're in compliance with everything. There are no violations. The one number that has yet to be mentioned, I don't have it down to the penny, but the confirmed loss was $303,000. Again, quick recap, we started at $780,000, so significant decrease in our overall loss for the last fiscal year. But I can say that I appreciate all the time that Mark takes to make sure that our numbers are in the right buckets and moving around correctly. And so the audit only confirms that, again, we're financially sound as an institution, and we're spending our money wisely.
100%, yep, 100%. And I have 2 more required deliverables I did want to touch on, but before I proceed, are we all good on the financial things? All right, awesome. So I have 2 other required deliverables here. I think Mark and I, we didn't quite get this in the board packet, but it's coming via email. I think we got it set up. So I know you don't have them in front of you, but I'll kind of do a quick recap of what all is in here. So this first one is the required governance communication. So essentially what it does is just confirm that we've concluded with our audit. It kind of goes through the results. It talks about that we implemented GASB 84, fiduciary activities related to the People Activity Fund that's now reported as a special revenue fund. It goes into the specific accounting estimates that we evaluated and made sure were reasonable and adequate in terms of the financial statement disclosures they represented. It goes in and we talk about just certain items that we adjusted this year related to some accounts receivable, accounts payable, so just some minor items that we ended up recording. And then we also talk about no disagreements with management, as obviously if we were having issues, I'm sure we all would have heard about that a long time ago, but everything went smoothly. And then it just talks about the different areas of the financial statement that we did audit. So that's the governance communication. And then the final deliverable that I have here is the management letter, which just kind of talks about specific recommendations or processes that the charter could review, and I think this one is something that gets carried forward every single year, but it's kind of just segregation of duties, just being a smaller shop, in terms of just having checks and balances. We just have a comment in terms of just recommending ideal segregation of duties, and also just reviewing accounts payable and accounts receivables at the end of the year, just to make sure that we're reporting those accrual basis schedules correctly. But again, that was essentially the result of the audit, and I want to give another shout out to Mark. I think he does a fabulous job, and he's a pleasure to work with. And with that, if there's no other questions, I will conclude.
Board, any further questions? We appreciate your time. You did that very quickly, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We allocated about an hour, so.
No problem.
And Mr. Brocklehurst, thank you. All right, moving along to fifth grade placement for the 22-23 school year. Does anybody want to kick this off?
Is this discussion or vote?
I'm prepared to make a motion, but we can have further discussion if we would like based on Mr. Holmes' comments in the COO report. So I guess I'll start it off. My first question, do you mind coming back up to the podium, Mr. Holmes? So back to the modulars, obviously we don't have a firm number right now. Do we have a ballpark number?
They were committed to sending that to me today, but I checked it about 10 minutes before this meeting. I still haven't got those ballpark numbers.
No idea.
Well, I also did some Google searching on what kind of standard rates are, and I think it's, but those numbers were so varied, I hate to even mention them, because it depends on the condition of the portables, how far they have to move them, whether you're new, whether you've got water in, whether you've got bathrooms and sinks and things like that. So there's quite a bit of variation yet in those.
Are we looking at purchase or lease?
We would, the gentleman that I communicated with this week, they're able to lease those to us because they're used portables, and he said we'd probably get a pretty good price on them. So.
Do they put in infrastructure as needed, cement pads, bring utilities out?
Right. And obviously if there's water in those bathrooms and sinks, there's a lot more infrastructure cost than if we go without that.
Are we looking at going with bathrooms inside the portables? Or?
Well, depending on where we put them, one of the locations that we've identified, if you go out this door and go to your right, there's an outside door there out to an area that we wouldn't be building on in the near future. And that, since we'd be using that door, there's locker rooms just, that direction down the hallway and just down this direction in the hallway. So we might not need to do bathrooms in those portables. That's a decision we can make when we see pricing and costs.
Correct. I'm assuming all code driven. Do we have to have covered awnings walking out for inclement weather days, safety?
We would not have to have that by requirement, is my understanding.
And how far would these potentially be placed from the main building?
I think the distance from that door to the end of the cement, which is kind of also the end of the building, is somewhere around 50 to 60 feet.
I'm probably not asking a lot of questions you may not know that we had.
Well,
discussed.
some of it I've stepped it off.
Okay. Discussion-wise, what grade levels are we looking at? Would this be 4, 6, or would we be looking at putting other grade levels in there?
What I'd like to do is if we do this, is put high school on the top floor in our current academic wing, and then put one grade level, either 6th, 7th, or 8th, in the portables all together in one location. We haven't really had a lot of discussion about what grade level that would be.
How many classrooms are we going to be short, or how many students are we over for next year?
Well, it's an interesting question because one of the things that the staff has communicated this year is that because of, there's some added stress because they're always switching rooms and they're sharing rooms and things like that. So I think we would need at least 4 new classrooms for next year. But if we had a group of 6 classrooms, it might give us some of that additional space to just reduce the amount of teacher movement around the building during the day.
Is it 2 classrooms per modular or 4 modulars?
The map that he sent me today, this afternoon, it shows it's 1 unit that has 4 classrooms. And that's my understanding of the other unit we're looking at. It's actually a 10 unit, a 10 classroom unit that he believes could be separated into 4 and 6. And that larger unit has restrooms and water capabilities in it right now where it's situated. Whereas the 4 classroom one does not have water inside the modular.
Did he come out and walk the site?
No, he has not come out here. He actually is from Michigan. And so we've been communicating by email.
But he would feel confident that he could locate 1 and 2 on the west side of the building?
Yeah, the 2 he's discussing with us are already in Colorado, but their leases are ending at the end of this school year.
You guys have any questions?
I have a thought. I'm just trying to think of how to word this. Something that I have heard with regards to all of this issue of 6th grade and modulars and high school and middle school, and I've heard some in the comments of the survey. I've mostly heard just from parents in the community, is a concern for, I don't know if concern's the right word, but basically the issue of a need to have greater distinction between the middle school and the high school. This is part of this whole issue in my view. Are we going to be able, and I'm sure there's a lot of thought going into this right now, but are we going to be able to create that greater distinction? Will the modulars help with that? Not only for middle school and high school, but I know that there are some parents concerned with having 6th grade in the mix all the way through 12th grade. A lot of schools have 6th grade as part of elementary. That's not what we're talking about doing right now. I understand, but I want to put that in the mix here of the discussion that we're thinking on and talking about is we do need to find ways, as we're thinking about all this, to have that greater distinction, middle school, high school. So as we're thinking about all this, planning all this, that's something that is on my mind and heart. So I'm just going to put that out there.
And I think this plan helps move us in that direction by having a high school floor and a middle school floor. And the thing that you mentioned about 6th grade does kind of lend to the idea of maybe putting 6th grade in those modular classrooms. So those are all things that we would need to consider as we decide where different groups go.
That's wonderful. And so the second wing that we are getting ready to break ground on, what is that going to be dedicated to? What grades?
That would be the high school wing, and the current wing we have would become the middle school wing, is my understanding of how it was all designed in the beginning.
Okay.
I haven't heard really anybody suggesting that we should do it the other way around.
And so scheduling will facilitate all of that. The distinctives, keeping things separate, I guess. Keeping grades separate.
And one of the things that we've actually discussed a little bit on the admin team is that just for lunch purposes, we may need to, we're going to at least look at separating the middle school and high school schedules a little bit, offsetting them so that their lunch schedules kind of go back to back to back, which requires start times for middle school and high school classes to be a little bit separated. And our high school hopefully is big enough next year that we could do that without too much, disrupting things too much.
Okay, great.
We haven't looked at in much detail at this point.
Mr. Brockhurst, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Financially, what number scares you in relation to this?
Number scares me. For this year or next?
For 22-23 fiscal year, just for the, we're only talking 22-23 fiscal school year for a 9-month lease, or do these come in 12-month increments that we would have to commit to?
Well, it's probably a 12-month lease, but the price is actually the important piece, whether it's, because it'll take them a little while to get them moved in, and then when the year's done, it'll take a little while for them to move them off.
I think leasing versus buying is a lot more palatable. I don't know that I have a number for you in terms of what's scary without going through the whole budget process, which we're going to do in the next month anyway. We'll get closer to that number.
We need to make a decision tonight on this, and I was hoping too that we had something tangible that we could look at, but obviously we're not there right now.
We're not, and I would caution us as a board. I think we can make a statement of intent where our hearts might lie tonight. But to your point, Ryan, the numbers for these modulars are all over the board. And lease may be the right way to go, but until we get a presentation, a buy option, we don't know. Understanding the retention value, resale, there could be opportunities to buy. We just don't know where it's all going to shake out yet. But I think I can confidently say that regardless of which way we go, it's going to cost several $100,000. And I just do quick math to try to keep it simple. If our PPOR is $8,000 per student head, that's 100 students that it takes just to cover the cost of the building for 1 year. Right? So it's not a number that the board can take lightly to make this decision. I think it's a number that needs to be acknowledged, because inevitably it's going to be a number that will, I think it's going to require us to go into reserves to authorize this. This is not a positive cash flow decision.
No, absolutely not. So my understanding, Mr. Holmes, is that we could potentially have that number as soon as next week.
Yes.
Okay. Well, with that said, I'm going to make a motion to...
Can I ask a few
Go
questions?
ahead, yeah.
Sorry. I had a few questions. What is the space capacity in the West Campus for next year? Do you know, are we at max capacity there as well?
No, we're not at capacity of that building.
Would it be able to accommodate 6th grade logistically?
Yes, at one time, I think there were close to 900 students at that campus.
Okay. My other question would be for the construction, phase 2 construction timeline. I know you said we're wanting to break ground in the spring. What is the duration of that project? Do you know?
It should be completed before August of 2023.
6-month duration?
Well, they will want a 12-month timeline to do that.
This spring. So
Start this spring, complete by spring or summer of 2023.
and then, so obviously construction will be happening during school. What about construction noise? Where's the new phase? It attaches on somewhere back here, correct?
Right, there's a, for those of you familiar with the commons area, there's a window that looks outside, pretty close to the kitchen, and that would be a doorway to that new wing. That's how it was designed.
The new wing on the north or the west?
The new wing would be north of the current wing.
North, not east.
It would be, so this one is about right there, and the new one would go right east from the cafeteria.
Just right that way.
So it's the northeast corner.
Northeast corner, okay. So it's pretty far from where you're considering putting the modular?
Yes.
So is the only way to have 6th grade stay here is to have modulars?
One of the things that, that Mrs. Seymour communicated to me my first week here was I'm so glad you're here because I need space, I need it now. Because they're running, I mean, this year, even during this year, teachers trade classrooms, they move around, there's quite a bit of just movement. I don't know if some of our East faculty would like to talk to that point. Would you entertain their thoughts on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I would like to hear more about our bond requirements. I know you mentioned that as well.
Just the way the bonds are structured, it tends to count the revenue that's in the building for that particular campus, and there's some separation. I don't know if Mark wants to talk to that. He probably understands that better than I do.
The enrollment's based off of 6th through 12th, all the way through. So
And that's codified in the covenants.
that's in those covenants, that the revenues from those students go towards that bond payment. So in light of that, without talking to the bond council, I don't know that you can move 6th over there. And
Might not be a option anyway. But we could hear from it, for sure as well.
Yeah.
If anybody wants
I share
Sorry
a
for
classroom.
putting
I mean,
you on.
my classroom is used during my first period when I have off. I go into the staff lounge and work in there at a desk that I share with Miss Edwards on her off period when her classroom's been used. So Miss Edwards' classroom is used for both of her off periods, and she's science, and that's tough because she does more hands-on preparations for her classes, but they're at the end of the day. So after the study hall is done, then she comes back in and prepares for the next day when everyone's gone. So that kind of interrupts her a lot. It doesn't really bother me to be in my classroom because I'm pretty mobile. Like I can just take my computer and go in there and I make my copies for the day or for the week. I think it's really in the transition when the bell rings and the kids are coming out and all the kids who are waiting for this other, because we have to wait till all the teachers out with her cart and all the other students, and so it kind of clogs up the halls for those classes. I mean, it's usually like one in each kind of section during the transitions. That's an inconvenience. Now I know there's teachers who share the room for both periods that isn't science, and that's tough because those teachers don't get to stay in their classroom while in their off period to prepare for their classes or to do their lesson planning and things like that. And so it just depends on what the teachers, where they are in their preparations. I do a lot of my preparations at home. So when I come in, I'm okay to be in the teacher's lounge because I make copies. With the other two teachers that I know of that both of their classrooms are used during both of their off periods, it's really hard for them. For both of their periods to be used, they can stay in there, but it's hard to focus and walking around and getting things in their room is kind of distracting to the student. So that is a challenge. It just kind of depends on the teacher's needs and their preparations. And I'm trying to think what other classes. Oh, there is one class, a math class, that has to meet in the drama room where they're on their desks. So that is really not appropriate, and that's a challenge for the kids and for the teacher. Not to mention what I've seen of the traveling teachers is they're always running to the next class. So when a class is over, I might meet with a student or two on their way out and kind of touch base with them or whatever about math. Well, those teachers don't have time to do that, no matter what subject they are. They basically are like, everyone's out and they're on the run, and then so whoever's classroom they're going to, that teacher has to wait, whether they're, wherever they're going, they have to wait for that incoming teacher with their cart before they can go do anything, whether they're going to a break or to a duty, whatever it is. So it's kind of a puzzle, if you will, to share those classrooms. We're doing it, and I think everyone is being as gracious as possible, positive as possible, but I think there are challenges, definitely for the traveling teachers. Those carts are heavy, and when they hit a bump on every little section, stuff goes flying. And not to mention they're traveling the same transition that all these kids that we're overcrowded by are running down the halls. Not running, but going through the halls. They're in mass transitioning, and so that's also very challenging. So there are definitely challenges with sharing rooms. I think that we are capacity in our classrooms. And the modulars, I think, are a great option. I think that is, for some people who share, they're like, I'll be the modular, so I don't have to share, you know? So there are different perspectives depending on who you are and what it's been like for you.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think that has an impact on teacher morale in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I think for some, yeah, I mean, because they don't get any space, they don't get any downtime, right? They have to be out of their like safe zone of preparation or like just decompressing during their lunch period or during their off period of planning, whatever it is that, I know one teacher, like true story, this teacher even tells the story, that on her off period, when her classroom it's not being used, she hides under her desk and like takes a nap on her off period, so no one finds her. This is amazing, because she's an introvert and she needs that quiet space, and there isn't any. And so for some, it is challenging.
I would just say, just to piggyback on everything that you said, one, I agree 110% with that. But in addition to that, when you think about the culture and climate of a school, some of the expectations that you have are when you walk into a classroom, you're able to see whatever the social contract is. That's something that we were just learning through Capturing Kids' Hearts. You're able to see learning standards, those kinds of things. And one of the things that's really important is developing a relationship and a rapport with students. And one of the things that we would like to see teachers do is greet students as they're walking in the door. But if you're also coming in the door at the same time with them with a cart, you're not able to do that.
And that's
if you've
absolutely
developed
true. Yeah.
social contracts with your students, you're not able to have them consistently posted. If you're trying to know, like, what is the student supposed to be working on or learning, and I walk into a classroom and I'd like to see that posted, it's not something that a teacher who's traveling around is able to do. And unfortunately, it impacts the way we start class is so incredibly important to setting the tone for the climate and culture for the entire hour and the experience there. And if you're on scramble constantly to get there in the 4-minute time for your day of passing, and we do as much as we can to minimize the up-down, but we do have some teachers that have to travel in 4 minutes from one upstairs to downstairs on a cart, you know, and then be ready for kids to come in and greet them appropriately, along with having all the things that we would want. So these are stressors for students, not just for staff, not just for teachers who are having their rooms used every hour and aren't able to go ahead and prep, but also for those teachers who are constantly just shuffled.
Yeah.
You don't have my first year I was sharing my office with my husband because I didn't have a classroom, so I was traveling as well. And I never had a chance to start something and be able to come back to it when I was coming back to that place. So it was never able to accomplish very much during whatever plan time I did have. And then the students also are searching for these teachers either before school or after school, and they don't know where they're going to be in order to make contact with them.
Do the modulars provide then the opportunity for pretty much everybody to have their own space?
Part of that would depend on what our enrollment looks like for next year, but it would get us closer to that number. And that's where, even though the four classroom modular might be a better price, we might need to look at the 6 classroom modular if it's at a reasonable, similar price, and it would help that situation even more.
One of the other things that was brought up at one time was the option of having some part of 6 at West and then like having that choice. Why was that ruled out as part of your recommendation?
Part of that is there's been some significant feedback from parents that they just want all the kids together. But that's not, I mean, that is still an option to do that. If there was, from our survey, it shows that one class of 6th grade parents would want their kids to stay at West Campus. That would still leave, you know, 4 or 5, probably 4 classes of 6th grade here.
But I wonder if they knew they were the only ones over there and how they feel about that.
Right, that would be part of that process to say, well, if you wanted to stay, here's what the programming would look like, here's what the specials options would be, and it would be less than what they would have here in some of those things. So that's part of the reason why, number one, it would be probably just one class if we went by parent choice. And what that choice is has not been really detailed to those parents in a significant way.
What kind of impact would that have on our teachers if we did something like that?
I know the sixth grade team here has always wanted to stay here together on their team. It's a very productive team, does a great job. And they've been very consistent that they would love to stay here as a team.
In one of the points that Ms. Sigfrids was making, it made me realize with the cost of the modulars, how do furnishings play into this in terms of what would be needed for the modulars? Does it play into the new build? And I can't remember if furnishings are financed through the bond. How does that all work?
Yeah, part of the furnishings for that process can go through our current phase 2 financing process. So that is furniture that we will need to buy anyway when the high school wing is built. And so Mr. DiVincenzo and I had some discussions about furniture and costs and things like that, and we need to, what we agreed is that we need to work with Mr. Brocklehurst and have a meeting sometime in the next couple of weeks and start looking at furniture costs and availability is also part of that process to make sure that we have furniture, because we're not sure what delivery timelines are going to be on furniture. So it's something that we've already started discussions on. But it wouldn't, having portables here would not add to the long-term cost of furniture, because we would order furniture for those modulars that we would use for the academic wing of this building.
Yeah, I think that, as I just heard mumbling around the room, we need to order that sooner rather than later if we want it for this August, knowing that phase 2 isn't really until next August. And then more along that same point, I'm assuming we're trying to buy furniture that is matching, so we don't have mismatched stuff throughout the building, which means you're now ordering for an entire building well in advance. Do they store those furnishings, or is that something that we're going to have a headache of to store?
Most of the furniture companies that do that, they have warehouses that they can store your furniture for you if you place orders early. And we may not necessarily match the high school academic wing furniture to the middle school academic wing furniture. We need to look at the cost of that, and some of that may not even be available anymore. So we might not necessarily do the same. But hopefully we would have a pretty good match for everything in that high school wing.
But the important piece is it doesn't take away from our overall cost. It doesn't add to it.
Right.
I'm going to make a motion. I hereby move that after receiving community, teacher, and staff feedback identifying prohibitions within bond covenants and facing traffic issues at the West Campus, we elect to proceed forward with intent for placement of all 6th grade at the East Campus. We further direct the COO and CFO to work together on finding the most effective accommodations through careful consideration of learning environment and expenditure incurred. Once accommodations and expenditures are identified, the board will need to call a special meeting for final approval.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion on the motion? All right. Mr. Michkowski, how do you vote, sir?
Aye.
Mrs. Quinn?
Aye.
Mr. Gold?
Aye.
Mrs. McEwen?
Aye.
Mrs. St. Alvin?
Aye.
And for the record, Ryan Graham votes aye. The motion carries. So at this point, we'll be relying on you two to let us know once we have something finalized, and then we're going to have to call a special meeting just based on the expenditure incurred, especially if we're going to have to authorize going into reserve. So, all right.
And just one more quick note, I'm going to try to schedule a time to go look at these Colorado portables probably Monday. So try to move as fast as we can.
Thank you. For our community, if you're listening to that, please understand that is our intent to move forward with keeping 6th grade here at the East Campus. So if there's any questions that are coming up after this meeting tonight, I mean, we just have to finalize the final number. So please understand that, but that is our intent to keep 6th grade here. All right, moving on to the 22-23 calendar year. Mr. Holmes, you might as well stay up there.
We can cheer.
Yeah. Slap chick.
So obviously, each board member has received a copy of the calendar that you provided. If there's anything you want to highlight on there before we have further discussion on it.
I want to recognize Mrs. Buzzle. She did the work on putting together this calendar, and her intent was to match this with, after looking at the district calendar that they approved, and keep our calendar very similar to what we've been doing this year. So I want to acknowledge her that she did the work on this calendar.
I have a question for start of school, which all grades would be August 17th. Do we want to consider having a alternate date for West Campus if we don't have our access built?
Yeah, I think that's something that we'll need to consider. And in a couple times, places where I've started schools and we were in building projects, the boards went ahead and approved the calendar, but also communicated that to the community that if construction timelines don't align with the calendar, there's a possibility of moving those dates back. And the advantage of doing that is that for things like fall break, Thanksgiving break, holiday breaks, it gives parents the certainty of what those break times are so that they can schedule and request vacation time from their employers and some things like that, even though we know that construction can impact those start dates.
Should we expect snow days to be back to a normal amount for next year?
I hope so.
How many snow days are built in? Is that listed on here? In years past, she's given us how many snow days she would. I think we had 8 actually, but.
Mr. Walker, do you remember how many snow days we started with before we made the changes on the Charlie? 8?
We had 8 this year.
We started this year.
Mhm. I mean, I'm sure she's building in plenty of snow days, I was just wondering.
I don't see it identified on here.
The number of snow days are just called out as a note usually? Or they actually note?
She has given us that information, not on the calendar, but for our information.
I'm comfortable moving forward with the calendar, even not knowing at this point. Obviously, that's something we can address further. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the 22-23 calendar?
Make a motion to approve the 22-23 calendar as it stands.
I'll second that motion. Any further discussion on said motion? Mr. Michkowski, how do you vote, sir?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Gold?
Aye.
Mrs. McEwen?
Aye.
Mrs. St. Albert?
Aye.
For the record, Ryan Graham votes aye. The 22-23 calendar is approved. Will you be sending this out, Mr. Holmes?
Yes, we can send this out.
Good, perfect. Thank you, sir. All right, up next is the graduation requirements. Mr. Holmes?
You need a stool. Just stand.
Move the microphone.
apologize, I gotta find it real quick.
You ready? You
Yes,
want me?
sir.
Okay, I'll go first then. The graduation requirements for Monument Academy High School have been very rigorous. They're designed to, that when students complete those requirements, they meet the graduation entrance requirements for Colorado universities. They're also very similar to what students would need for just about any four-year university in the country. There are a few places where they may require 3 years of language or additional year of science for certain programs that students might apply for, but these requirements, as they've been, have always done that, and these continue to do that. Part of what you see on this document is it compares them to District 38 requirements, and then also compares them to the Colorado Commission on Higher Education requirements for admission to four-year colleges and universities. The one thing that we tweaked just a little bit to simplify them has to do with some of the small credits like technology and leadership and some of those things. Because what we see is that some of our, the way it plays out in their schedules, some of the times the students don't have a lot of electives when you look at the way the old requirements were drawn up. And that's why I also provided for you a four-year plan of what these changes might look like in the student's schedule. And what you see is that for each year then, the students have electives, 3 electives that they can choose from each year. So it broadens the electives, which is, obviously as our school, the high school grows in number, we'll be able to offer more variety of electives to those high school students. And that's what always happens when you start a new school and grow it from scratch, is that the more students you have in the building, the more electives you can offer.
In my understanding tonight, this is just more or less a kind of first brush at this. You're just presenting it to the board without
Yes.
taking any action tonight.
Yes, just wanted you to get some eyes on just the tweak that we've made, be able to look it over, open it up for discussion, and we'll be talking about it with the faculty as well.
Okay. When would we need to finalize this or take action on this?
There's not necessarily a deadline, but for the purposes of letting, the new students that might be considering staying from 8th to 9th grade or new students moving in, it'd be good to have them by next board meeting to know these are the graduation requirements.
And when do you plan on meeting with faculty to have this discussion?
We were going to meet this week, kind of got thrown off schedule, but we are planning to meet next week on a couple of things, and if we have time, we'll work it in then, if not, the week after that.
So you would be prepared to bring input back at the next board meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Board, is there any questions? Well, now you get to sit down, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. All right, I'll take this one on. This is in relation to the threat assessment team. This is going to be a little bit long-winded, but I've written some stuff down. For those of you listening tonight that have not been part of the East Campus Communications, there was a school threat that was relayed to the El Paso County Sheriff's Office 1 month ago tonight. There have been multiple communications sent out to the East Campus parents, families, and staff. Since receiving that threat, I've immersed myself in being very intimately involved to ascertain facts and determining what our weaknesses are and how we can improve as a school. There have been multiple lessons learned as I identified in my last statement to the East Campus community, and one of those lessons is the need for a threat assessment team. Tonight, my intent is to bring forth a motion and directive in creating a threat assessment team, but first I will speak to my expectations of what this team would look like, the authority they would have, and how they would exercise that authority. Though this team, if approved by the board, would be tasked with further development of certain procedures, this will at a minimum set the wheels in motion for creation, development, and execution. So I've got basically five topics I wanted to talk about. A lot of this information has come from the Department of Homeland Security, Secret Service, how they handle school threats across the nation. So number one, we would need a board directive to develop a threat assessment team. This team should be comprised of, at a minimum, a school administrator, our SRO, a counselor, mental health professional, and any other professionals to include a teacher or coach. The team would need to be chaired by a school administrator, and if needed, the chair of the team should have the authority to include an ad hoc member who maybe knows this student of concern or whoever the student may be of concern. The chair should also be tasked with development of skills and training for team members. Number two, this team would be tasked with reviewing, refining, creating, and developing processes to evaluate and respond to school threats. Now, I don't want to say that like we don't have a safety team in place already, but there certainly are some things that we can do to expand on that. This would include threats against students, teachers, or other faculty. This would also be any threats that were made directly or indirectly by telephone, in writing, on social media, through El Paso County Sheriff's Office, and/or Safe to Tell. This team would obviously be given the authority and capacity to conduct an inquiry or investigation into the matters at hand. Number three, the team would be further tasked to review, refine, develop processes on identifying, assessing, managing, and communicating threatening situations. This would include reviewing and creating student code of conduct policies, school discipline policies, and security safety policies that are applicable to MA. As of now, we can utilize D38 policies if we do not have specific policies in place regarding the aforementioned. Reviewing the procedures and legal parameters for collaboration with school officials, law enforcement, and mental health professionals. We would also need to look at legal considerations in developing information, sharing policies and procedures, and then of course review of state and federal statutes. Number four, some of the questions that we have already answered, but the threat assessment team would need to have answers for, and I'm just going to read off some questions here. What should be the roles and responsibilities of school administrators, teachers, security personnel, and other school officials in responding to threats and threatening situations? When should parents be contacted concerning a threat assessment due to a threatening situation? Which situations should be handled within the school? Which situations require notification of and intervention by law enforcement officials? What should be the roles and responsibilities of law enforcement officials in responding to threats and threatening situations in schools? Under what conditions will information concerning a student or a threatening situation be shared? What type of information will be shared, and with whom will it be shared? When should students who engage in threatening behavior be referred to outside services, such as mental health agencies, for assistance? How should referrals to outside agencies be handled? What actions should be taken to develop and support climates of safety within the educational institution? What steps could be taken by school officials to encourage students to come forward with concerns about potentially violent situations? What policies or actions would encourage students to bring their problems to the attention of adults? And how can school officials and other adults work with students to resolve problems and remedy underlying conditions? Number five, additional major components and tasks for creating a safe school environment. Assess the school's emotional climate. Emphasize the importance of listening in schools. Take a strong but caring stance against the code of silence. Work actively to change the perception that students are not being heard in their concerns. Prevention and intervention of bullying. Empowering students by involving them in planning, creating, and sustaining a school of culture and respect. Ensure that every student feels that he or she has a trusting relationship with at least one adult at the school. Create mechanisms for developing and sustaining safe school climates. Be aware of physical environments, and emphasize an integrated systems model with parent involvement. So that outlines a lot of the information that's out there right now in relation to how, and obviously we're doing a lot of these steps, but I feel it is very important that we establish a threat assessment team that is going to be the go-to for these types of situations. And so this is where all this leads tonight. I do have a motion prepared, but I wanted to open it up to any discussion with the board.
Ryan, one question. So like how much, is there a resource out there that kind of has some of this already canned that you were thinking of? Okay, could you maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
So the resource, I mean, there's two resources, as I mentioned. I mean, a lot of this information comes from, and that is the Secret Service and the Department of Homeland Security. And they typically have guides, information that are out there. You know, this is something also that I mean, I don't want to assume, but I'm going to say our SRO should be very familiar with some of this. But I would want our SRO as part of this team. And the team should, I mean, really be comprised of probably minimum 5 individuals. And they would be the ones that would be taking any type of threat that comes through Safe to Tell, Pasadena Sheriff's Office directly and further investigating. I mean, that's not our role as a board. I know I've immersed myself in this situation, but there's no reason we can't have a team of professionals inside this school moving forward.
Would it be possible to hear from our current admin team and get some input from them on this issue?
Absolutely.
Would you guys be okay to speak your thoughts on this on the spot?
I mean, I think,
Oh, would you be able to use the
sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think, as you stated, Mr. Graham, that many of these things are, I think, are in place in some kind of way. I think they need to be formalized here. So I think the threat assessment team makes sense for us to figure out, how to have one of those here and what that's going to entail. Yeah. So I would be, I think mostly an ingredient. Figure out.
Would this be something, it sounds like a lot of work, would this be something we would be paying a stipend to these individuals to be on the team?
If we move forward on a formal directive to the COO to establish that, that is something that by all means you could bring back to this board as a recommendation that based on the amount of work. It will be a lot of work to get this off the ground, but if we already have processes, procedures, SOPs, SOGs in place, then ultimately we would be able to probably just bring that under one particular group of individuals, and they know that they're basically handling this moving forward. But yeah, it could be additional work.
It's additional work and it's additional responsibility. It's definitely something, not everyone's just going to want to sign up for.
Are there any concerns that you have off the top about any of this?
Capacity to be able to pull that together in the way that it needs to be. So you need to have quite a bit of attention, even though there are some things that are in place. We need some policy, procedure, people, and time. And honestly, that's just in short supply right now with the staffing levels that we have to be able to do that. So,
is there anything we could do as a board to assist in that? Are there folks we could pull in?
Well, I'm passionate about it, so I'd be happy to step up and help out however I could. Obviously, the way I foresee this is a team would come together, review policies, procedures that would go through governance, and then from there, governance would present to the board for final adoption. But, I mean, that's something that's obviously already in our wheelhouse as the board.
Does D38 have something like this already in place that we could utilize and not reinvent the wheel?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That'd be helpful.
But I would like to see one internal to MA.
Yes.
I think I'm highly supportive of this, and I'd love to see, one of the things feedback that we got, or questions we've received over all of this has been how to better educate the kids as well. And I'd love to see this threat assessment team find a way to, like an all-school assembly, something along those lines that really talks to the kids. I'm sure there are plenty of resources out there with people that can be brought in to give presentations and really discuss, what we keep hearing is a lot of the kids don't even realize they've heard something that's worth saying, or they just blow things off. But we also know situations where it's used on the opposite way as a bullying tactic with making false allegations to hurt somebody. So it's important to educate the kids on what should you be reporting, how do you report it, who do you report it to, but also what are the consequences. Just as an adult, you don't make a false police report. So what are the consequences if you made a poor decision to accuse somebody of something that's false? But an assembly, something along those lines that reaches everybody and provides that education. I could see a threat assessment team being valuable at putting something like that together as well.
I will support stipends, I will support whatever we need to support, but we need to be confident in a safe school environment for our students, for our teachers, for our faculty. And so I'm of the mindset that whatever we need to do, let's make it happen.
Ryan, one of the things that we do in in my business, we have a safety go-to team, which essentially is the same thing that we're talking about here, right? A threat assessment. In my world, we're talking about accident or incidents with aircraft. We have a resource that came in and trained us, set up all of our manuals, and then continues at the very least to do an annual exercise, right? Various levels. You could simulate a social media threat, you could simulate an El Paso County Sheriff Department threat, all kinds of different scenarios. I would be encouraging that if there is that type of resource, third party that can come in and audit the performance of such team and coach them and help to update, because more than likely they're also going to have industry background, other instances that they've gone through or been part of with other schools or other organizations in general. I'd like to know if we can look into that type of resource as well.
I very much agree with that. I think at this point, what I would recommend, and again, I have the motion, is to give this directive and, have our COO further explore this potentially. I'm happy to offer up my help however I can, but I do like the idea of having the professionals come in, but we need something internal that obviously we're not going to call, let's say that we're not going to call this group every time there's something that comes in. A lot of this stuff may simply be it comes across their desk and they make their recommendation ruling on it and it's done. But I want to make sure it's going to a central point of contact inside our campuses, whoever that may be. So I'm going to go ahead and make the motion. I hereby move that the MA Board of Directors direct and task the Chief Operating Officer, Merlin Holmes, with the creation and development of a Monument Academy threat assessment team. This team will be tasked with establishing assessment procedures, reviewing, refining, creating processes to evaluate and respond to school threats, reviewing, refining, developing processes on identifying, assessing, managing, and communicating threatening situations, to include but not limited to defining concerning and prohibited behaviors, receiving confidential reports to include safe to tell and law enforcement reports of incidents affecting either of our campuses, determining thresholds for law enforcement engagement, developing risk management options, creating and promoting safe school environments, making disciplinary recommendations based on findings, ensuring necessary training for stakeholders, staff, and students.
It's like a game show. I'll second the motion.
We have a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay. Mr. Buczkowski, how do you vote, sir?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Dole?
Aye.
Mrs. McEwen?
Aye.
Mrs. St. Alvin?
Aye.
For the record, Ryan Grant votes aye. Obviously, Mr. Holmes, I'm here to do what I need to do. I know there's a lot wrapped up into this. I will pass on everything that I have to research and study, but I know what I need to do. Thank you, Board. These will actually go pretty quick.
Okay.
So 15 to 14B, elections policy, we had our first read at the December 9th board meeting. Based on the recommendations and considerations of that first read, Mr. Buczkowski has brought back a final revision. Each of you have had that sent to you electronically. Is there any discussion on 1514B? Is there any request to have that policy read aloud? Okay. And I hereby move that we accept 1514B elections policy as presented tonight.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right. Mr. Buczkowski, how do you vote, sir?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Dole?
Aye.
Mrs. McEwen?
Aye.
Mrs. St. Alvin?
Aye.
And for the record, Ryan Grant votes aye. The next 6 policies. So 1514A, 1517, 1521, and 1523 have all been reviewed on governance. However, there is no revisions or changes, so I will make a motion that we accept those 4 policies as presented tonight with simply a review date.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Bishkowski, how do you vote, sir?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Dole?
Aye.
Mrs. McEwen?
Aye.
Mrs. St. Alban?
Aye.
And for the record, Ryan Graham votes aye. The next 3 policies, 2 policies, 1511 and 1520. Make sure I got that right. Have been presented tonight with revisions. Is there any further discussion on those 2 policies? And I will make a motion that we approve 1511, 1520 with the revisions presented tonight.
I'm sorry. There's nothing under B in this policy. 1511.
It is probably worthwhile we just give everybody a sec to look at 1511, because that does have a lot of changes to the admissions policy, so maybe we just discuss.
Absolutely. We can open this up to discussion.
I guess my only question was, what precipitated the changes or the additions?
Okay.
I think one of the tools that our admissions team needs is more clarification about when students come to apply at Monument Academy. Is it we always accept everybody, or especially as it relates to high school, sometimes students apply that are under credit. Sometimes the students want to make sure that we're clarifying that if students have been expelled at other places, we don't necessarily have to take those. And part of this was saying that the students are conditionally enrolled until we get records. Oftentimes, things move pretty quickly, and there's some of these things we can't ask ahead of time before parents apply. But if they have some of these conditions that would make it difficult for them to be successful in our school, then we need to be able to communicate that and say, well, this enrollment was conditional until we get your records that show you haven't been a behavior problem, that you're getting the credits you need, that you really will be successful in our school. And these have all been reviewed by legal as well as legitimate reasons for denying enrollment to a student.
Thank you. Was there supposed to be something under B?
I think B was removed by legal, if I remember right.
So we would just need to correct the subsection letters.
So, yeah, I think, so you're referring to the B that's blank?
Yes.
I'm going to pass my computer to Merlin, just to make sure that that is his understanding as well.
Okay. Where do you want to take this?
Yeah.
B doesn't have.
Right. I think it's just, I think that was the
Okay. So we could motion to approve this with relisting those grounds for denial of open enrollment, so that there isn't an empty letter.
I'll turn that into your motion, so moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Bishkowski, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Gold?
Aye.
Mrs. McEwen?
Aye.
Mrs. St. Alban?
Aye.
And for the record, Ryan Gray votes aye. So that took care of 1511. Let me go back now to 1520, which is public comment. That's the last policy we would need to approve tonight. So you see one of the changes is we removed executive director and replaced that with chief operating officer. Mr. Richkowski, do you have, mine did not come through like I was hoping. Can you speak to the other changes, revisions on that?
Yes, sir. So, like Ryan mentioned, in 1A, we do replace executive director with chief operating officer. In 2A, we mentioned that the public comment period will be provided at all regular public meetings and at the discretion of the board at special meetings. So we just wanted to clarify with the public that at special meetings that are just for executive session, there's not going to be a public comment time period. And that is all we have in that. Those are the only red lines to that policy.
I do have a question. Mr. Pachowski, I do have a question, the way that you worded that. When we say special meetings, and your reference was pertaining to executive sessions, as an example, if we call a special session for the numbers pertaining to portables, is that a special meeting that public comments are allowed because it's not executive session?
It would be at the board discretion.
Okay, so a special meeting, just in general.
Yeah, you know, it's a good question, Chris. It does say all regular, that there will be a public comment period provided, and then at the discretion of the board at special meetings. So, like a meeting, just like you say like that, the way it's written, it would be at discretion.
Okay. I just wanted clarification that it doesn't actually pertain to executive session, it's just a special meeting.
Correct. Yeah, it could even be like, you know, a training meeting, so.
Great.
Any non-regular meeting.
Great. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve policy 1520 as presented to the board.
Second. Any further discussion? Mr. Krzyzkowski, how do you vote, sir?
Aye.
Ms. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Gold?
Aye.
Ms. McEwen?
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubin?
Aye.
And for the record, Ryan Graham votes aye.
Too many papers.
All right, CCSP grant requirements, we need to have these completed by February 1st. So, one on the bridge.
This was
February 1st. So,
There's a scheduled site visit for February. We put it off, not as long as you guys.
so in essence of time, I move that the board issue itself a formal directive that all board members complete the assigned modules no later than January 31st. The modules will be disseminated as such. Ryan Graham will handle 1 through 5, Chris Stoll 6 through 10, Joe Buchkowski 11 through 15, Lindsay Clinton 16 through 20, Megan St. Aubin 21 through 25, Misty McEwen 26 through 30, and motion.
I second.
Any further discussion?
Put you on the party all nighter?
There is, I created the login, so I'll get that out to everybody. So there's one login, and it doesn't matter what order we do them in, so everybody just logs in and does their own, and then we'll get a we can submit that we completed that, get a certificate, and it'll be great. But I would suggest, reading through some of these things, I'd suggest that some of these are topics that are really relevant to all of us, and so only one of us getting information isn't very helpful. So whether we do a spring retreat or add them to future agendas to just kind of discuss highlights from your modules, that's my suggestion for following up with the really interesting information that we're all going to gather from our 5 pieces that we each do.
I'm scared to ask this question, but how long do each of these take?
I'm not sure. I meant to do one before we came and let you guys know, but it didn't get to that.
But we haven't done it for a year.
All right, we have a second. Any further discussion?
A second the motion.
Okay.
That's already seconded.
Move forward with the vote. Mr. Buczkowski, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Gold? Mrs. McEwen?
Aye.
Mrs. St. Aubin?
Aye.
And Ryan Graham for the record votes aye. You guys just received a formal directive. Thank you.
You should have voted aye.
These also, every one of these modules has a pre-test assessment to kind of gather what your knowledge is about each topic, and then you move into the actual modules itself. So.
All right, last on discussion action, we'll move into letter I, increasing the HR budget in relation to the HR subcommittee. Mr. Buczkowski, I'll pass that to you, sir.
Thank you, Ryan. So as we approved in the December meeting, we allocated $10,000 to this assessment for the school. And as Misty and I did our research and then ended up contracting with Employers Council, we can do the survey, assessment, review, the grievance policy, all that for a little over $4,000. But to actually then take steps based on what that survey, we would then exceed the amount that was allocated at that budget. And so really probably the first point of discussion is what do you guys intend to do with the survey results that we're going to receive? And so Employers Council recommendation is 2 things. One, to go forward with COO survey and training, a coaching. So basically Merlin would get a coach to address issues from the survey and also to be someone there. I think they budgeted like 7 or 10 weeks where he would have someone that's not a board member and not faculty or staff to discuss basically communicating and working with the people of Monument Academy community. So he'd have his own third-party coach as part of this package. Then also they recommend that based on the survey results that come back, that they would design a little bit of team building for faculty and staff so that there'd be a little bit of training that would occur with them. And so they had some dollars budgeted there. The other element that's in there and so those are kind of fixed costs. The other element that was in there that was part of, that has a monthly cost is this ethics hotline where anyone from MA could report either ethics issues or other concerns anonymously, and that would come to the board. It would not come to, they wouldn't recommend that it would go to say just one person like a COO or one person like an HR director, but rather it would go to a group like the board so that they could then, a group of people then would receive that information and be responsible for it. Misty and I thought that in the survey that is about to be done, we'll ask the MA employees, do they want to have that ethics hotline? Is that something that they would find valuable? certainly, if we did go forward with those, well, I'll call just their stage 2 or phase 2 HR assessment tasks, all of those is $10,150. And keep in mind that we just, Misty and I committed to $4,220 at this point. So you're looking at somewhere around $15,000, round numbers, to both complete the survey and then complete some training based on what the survey tells us.
What's your recommendation?
I recommend, doing this. So this is definitely the lowest cost of some of the vendors that we looked at. What I don't want us to do is just take a survey and then do nothing. And so it's like, what were we going to do with that? What action were we going to take? How are we going to help Merlin? How are we going to help the faculty based upon what we learned from this survey? So I suppose the alternative that we could discuss here is somehow internally with the board and our own staff, we just figure out a way to do it on our own. That's not what these HR consultants recommend, is that they recommend with some additional training.
Again, I feel like it should go back to the professionals. I mean, that's what we're hiring this third party for. My question would be, do we need to make a decision on phase 2 tonight before getting the survey results, or how would you recommend proceeding?
That's a good question. Misty, maybe what do you think? I do think, Ryan, it's possible that we can get the survey results by the February board meeting, and then at the February board meeting, then go ahead and authorize COO coaching and employee team building. And we may even know whether the employees want to have this ethics hotline or not. So it does look like we can postpone one more month. And so maybe we don't need a motion at all, but it's definitely something that we should know about, is that to really do the job right, we're probably going to need to do some sort of additional consulting that was above the $10,000 that was originally allocated.
I feel like at the last meeting, that's what we promised this community, really, is that we were going to, we revealed a bunch of the things, talked through how we got here, and really to move forward, that we're going to do something that's really actionable and shows results. So, and I think that relies on some professionals.
Well, and I think that it takes the weight off of an already taxed team, keeping it in the hands of the professionals, as well as it keeps everything above board, that this was completely objective. All the changes, all of the recommendations, and I think that's very important with where we're at right now. And I just want to clarify, Joe, maybe I missed this, but part of phase 1, if we're calling it that, is the 360 survey of the COO, correct? For the 400, that's part of phase 1.
Well, Misty, when we talked with them, they originally had it in phase 2. We asked, could it be moved to phase 1? And just to explain to the board, there would be a separate COO survey that is not all the employees of the school, but it's more like the 12 to 15 or so people that Merlin interacts with, the COO interacts with the most, whether it's board members, whether it's principals, assistant principals, HR, admissions, whoever it is. We identify those and then do a survey, and that way Merlin has data from the entire school and also kind of this group that he interacts with the most. And then the kind of coaching is then built around that. And so Misty and I asked that, well, let's do the 360 survey along with this phase 1. And they came back and said, yeah, it just doesn't work that way because it's built into the coaching. So So Misty basically, I'm just long-winded way of saying, they wanted to keep that in phase 2, even though we asked them to put it in phase 1.
How much is the disparity, about 4,000, between what we've already authorized?
Yeah, it's a little over 4,000.
So 5,000, we would be within phase 1 and phase 2.
Correct.
Mr. Brockhurst? How you feeling? That's fine.
What, hypothetical, I don't mean to play devil's advocate here, but my question would be, what happens if they come back and they say, well, we have no recommendations?
No, good. We have not signed anything committing the school to this phase 2. So we just wouldn't sign. We would come back, you could authorize us tonight an additional 5,000 for around 15,000 to do this sort of HR assessment stuff. And then based on how the survey goes or interaction with the consultant, if we decide, Misty and I decide, we're not going to use you guys for this. We're going to go back and rethink things with the board, then we just won't sign and we'll come back with some other recommendation.
But this at least gives you a channel to navigate in relation to finances on it.
Yeah, this allows us to, if we need to move forward, that we can without waiting another month.
Would you make a formal motion?
Yes, sir. So I move that we increase the approved HR assessment budget from $10,000 to $15,000.
I'll second that. Any further discussion?
Is there a chance that we could have results, well, I guess, I don't know when we'd be calling a special meeting for portables, but is that going to be too soon? We might have to really wait till the next board meeting.
Good question, Lindsay. It's probably too soon. We need to pick questions, so we're going to start that process tomorrow. Then we need to send those and gather some kind of employee data to send off to the consultant. They will then create an online survey and hopefully have it up by the end of the month. They then leave it up for, it's like a week or 10 days. I can't remember, Misty might remember the exact number of days that they leave the survey open. And they're hoping to basically close it like the 8th or something like that was the target, which then I think our meeting was the 10th. Now, all this data is electronic, and the board would have a login to see the data as it comes in. And so you would have the results, but right away. But that's the best timing we could do.
And all confidential.
Yes, so we don't know what each employee said. All that is kept with the consultant. We will have demographic breakdowns that our team is going to help choose. So, for example, East Campus, West Campus. Maybe it'll be faculty and admin staff. We can create some granular categories as part of this data set as well, but we need input kind of from our team.
So ultimately all aggregated to where there's no way anything gets tied back to a teacher or...
To an individual, no.
Any further discussion for the $5,000 allocation above the 10? Okay. Mr. Michkowski, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Dole?
Aye.
Mrs. McHugh?
Aye.
Mrs. St. Alban?
Aye.
For the record, Ryan Gray votes aye. All right, moving to letter H, board comments and announcements. Ms. Clinton, I'm going to make one quick comment. It was brought to my attention, and I would encourage each of you that are here tonight to go out to the commons area along the east wall. There's a Sources of Strength display, 2 Christmas trees. The students last fall before Christmas at some point were tasked with positive things that have happened here at MA East. I read it before I came in, and there's some very heartfelt stuff on there. So I would encourage everybody here to take a look at that on the way out. I don't know if anybody has already, but I didn't know about it until it was brought to my attention. So, East Wall, comments?
I just have a couple things from the East and West Campus PTO. Mr. Holmes already hit on some of these, but for East, they're doing their next teacher appreciation starting Tuesday after President's Day. And then for West, they are preparing for a used uniform sale on February 11th from 2 to 4. And they're also looking for more parents willing to help plan the STEAM night, which I know my kids are all excited about. So I'm excited that our PTOs are able to do so many of these events again this year.
Any further comments or announcements from the board? Any new business for next month's agenda? All right, somebody will motion to adjourn to executive session based on the citation that's presented on the agenda. After we do that, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Just to let everybody know, we'll remove ourselves and we're going to go to a conference room. Everyone's welcome to stay. I can't tell you if we are for sure going to have any action items after this executive session tonight, but we may be in there for a little bit. So you are welcome to stay if you would like.
I'll make a motion. I motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 4AB. To discuss specialized details of school security with regards to school security officers and to receive legal advice on specific legal questions regarding the above topic.
I second the motion. Any discussion on said motion? Any objection to said motion? Passes by unanimous consent. Thank you. We're going to adjourn to executive session.